Hey, this is Cornelius. I made a post on Instagram, whatever it was, and it was about don't be frustrated. Don't get discouraged when you feel as though your process is taking longer than everybody else's. It's easy for you to look at somebody else's life and to assume that maybe your process is taking longer because somehow the promise that comes along with the process is somehow been denied or either delayed, which in actuality, I always want you to remember this, that the greater the process, it typically means the greater the promise. Now, I want to give you the bad news, some of the bad news in the beginning, and then I'll expound on more why you shouldn't be discouraged, be frustrated. For some of us, and it's not really bad news, but for some of us, we should be cautious to make sure that our process is not just taking longer because of our immaturity or because of our desire to not change. That oftentimes we get into situations where we don't change and we don't move forward because we have gotten to a point in our lives where we just don't want to move forward anymore. And you don't want to make the changes which are necessary in order for you to be able to inherit the promise. Because you don't want to get a promise and you don't want to get to a place or reach a destination, or for some of us, we don't want to reach our place called there. Then once you reach it, you don't have the character enough to sustain it. And a lot of people want to get there. They want to get the stuff. They want to go and get the whatever it is, reach their place of success, however they choose to define it, and they want to go for that. The only thing is that they haven't gone through the process. See, I'm one of those guys, I don't really get much from when I hear people's stories and they're like, hey, I've always had it easy. Somebody handed this over to me and I grew it up. It was at this month and I grew up here and it was all great. It was all good. Those stories are great and I applaud those individuals, but I'm one of those guys, I like stories of struggle. I love stories of a good struggle. And because I like to hear about a person's process, because that's how I feel like it's been for my life. I feel like it's been a story of a struggle. It's been a fight to have to get to where you want to get to. It's been a fight having to fight people who didn't believe in you. It's a fight having to fight people who were with you who then left you. It was a struggle. It was a fight. It was a fight to have to tell yourself to get up out of the bed in the morning because you really didn't feel like it. It was a fight to fight against the depression. It was a fight to fight against the thoughts that were trying to eat you alive. It was the fight to fight against the bankruptcy. It was a fight to fight against the debt. It was a fight to fight against the feeling that you should just give up and quit, because you were noticing somebody else's process and you were maybe noticing that somebody else probably reached the place that you believe that you were going to get to a lot faster than how you got there. Or you maybe don't feel like you're there yet because you're still in the process. Listen, the greater the process, the greater the promise. You're focused on the wrong thing. You're focused on what you want to get to and not focused on what you need to learn in the process. Could you be faithful enough to stay through a process for 30 years and then be used for 3 years of great ministry, 3.5 years of great ministry, but powerful 3.5 years? You understand what I'm saying? Powerful 3.5 years that could now benefit the people who really need it the most. Could you be faithful? Could you be faithful to go through 10 years of a process just so you can be able to enjoy and be able to share with 20 years of a promise to be able to help other people? Could you go through the process and not constantly complain about the process that you're going through? Many of us, we stay in the process a lot longer than what we need to because we complain about it. We complain about the process. I don't know why it's so hard. I don't know why it's so difficult. I don't know why it seems like everybody else has this but me. I don't know why it seems like, I can't get into the college. I don't know why it seems like, I got kicked out of this thing. I don't know why it seems like this happened to me. I thought this is what it's going to be. God, I don't know why it seems like you've abandoned me. And we continue to blame God for a process that we need. At one point in my life, I used to complain about how I grew up. I mean, my family did the best they could with what they had. And I used to complain about it, not because I had bad situations, because I didn't have a real bad childhood. I was born in a little country town. I'd wake up early in the morning, 5:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning, going to shake a bottle up just so I can go out and feed some calves. We used to have a garden. We had a pond out back. I used to go out and catch catfish when my mom was inside, putting hush puppies together. Every Saturday morning, when other kids are waking up and they were watching cartoons on television, I was outside, with a push lawnmower cutting a couple acres of grass. When it was time to go, when I wanted to go outside and go play, I didn't have all nice things to go outside and go play with. It was you grabbed a stick off the ground and I'd go out and I would hit bumblebees or something like that, and I would call it b-ball. I did the best that I could with what I had. And but all those things they taught me. And then when I started matriculating through life, and then when I started working as a server at a restaurant, and I started doing all these other things, and I started noticing that my classmates were moving on, and they were getting the degree, and they were getting the jobs, and they were getting the houses, and they were getting the stuff. And I'm looking at everybody else's process, and I'm thinking to myself, God, somehow I feel like my process is going too slow. For somehow, God, I feel like the promise that I believe I'm supposed to inherit, I'm not getting there. God, I don't feel close to it. I don't feel like I'm getting there. And I had to finally come to myself to realize that everything that I've gone through in my life, it was preparing me for a particular moment. And then everything that I got to in my life to that moment was then preparing me for the next moment. Then everything that was preparing me for that level was preparing me for the next level. I never forget. We had people who talked about us. My wife and I, we had people who talked about us, years ago, and then it hurt us. And we're trying to figure out, why don't you like us? And then we had to toughen from that. Then the level grew. Then all of a sudden we had other people who talked about us, who hated us. Then it grew from that. Then we started getting death threats against us and our family. And then we had to toughen up. Then we had to develop with our emotional intelligence quotient. We had to develop, and we had to say, okay, even though they don't like us, I'm gonna still love them anyway. We had to mature in certain areas. It was part of the process. So when you get to the place that your character can sustain you where you need to be, you're focused on the wrong thing. You're focused on a promise. It's nothing like God to have you to go from a job that paid you a whole lot for you to have to go down to a job that don't pay you enough. You may feel like the job that you're on ain't paying you what you need, but what you fail to realize is that what God is focused on is not the paycheck. What God is focused on is the information you need to learn while you're at that place, because what you're learning while you're there is going to help you in the next stage of life. You think, well, God, I had my own business doing accounting, but now I'm just being an accountant. I was making X amount of dollars over here, but now I'm not making that. I'm not making that money over here anymore. But God's trying to teach you something. He's trying to teach you humility. God's trying to teach you in the job that you weren't having your processes right. So instead of you walking into the job with an attitude, learn the processes. Learn how they're doing what they're doing right. You're learning a process, and then you're receiving money for it. You may think, I'm not getting paid enough for what I know I can do and what my skill level is, what my talent level is. And I feel like I can always do it better. And I'm going to tell you something, that phrase, that idea, that ideology in our minds that we can always do something better is nothing more than pride, is selfishness, and it comes straight from the enemy. It gets me when people come to me and they say, you know what, I feel like I can pastor the church better. I feel like I can do this better. I feel like I can do all that. And I look at them, I say, well, go on and do it. If you feel as though you can do it better, well, then you come take my spot. And then you see when you put on my shoes, if you can handle what I handle, because you don't understand it. I'm able to handle this. I'm graced to handle it because I went through the process, because I've gone through processes that you didn't know anything about. I've cried in the darkness when the lights were off, when you didn't know anything about it. I've cried, I went to the fridge and I've had to pray to God, could you just bless me, have somebody to come and help me to get me some food. I've been there. I've been through the process. I know what it's like when Paul says, I know what it's like to abound. I know what it's like to also be abased. Therefore, I learned to be content in all things. I've gone through a process where now, no matter what place I get to, I don't have to be concerned about the place, because the place doesn't define me, because now my character is elevated more than the place. I know people who pray for God to get them to a promise. You pray for God to help you to get into the league. You pray for God to help you get the job. You pray for God to help you get the spouse. You pray for God to help you to get the child. You pray for God to help you get all this stuff. But now you get it, but because your process. Now your process, and the way that we get it, we oftentimes get stuff and we put God's name on it. We put a bow and it says from God, it ain't from him at all. Typically, it's from the enemy, especially when you get it too quick. And I prove that in saying the Bible says that wealth attained little by little, because when you get it little by little, you learn to appreciate it. But nevertheless, I go back, you get all those things. And I've seen people, they get to that place. And then once you get to that place, you turn around and now you don't have time for God anymore. Now you got the big contract, and now you don't have time for God anymore. You needed him when you needed him when all you had was $20 in the bank, but now that you got 20 million, you don't need him anymore. You needed God when, you know what, when your singing career wasn't what you wanted it to be. But then once you got the big contract, you didn't need him anymore. Now you got your promise and you forgot all about your process. And woe unto you if you think for a second that God is going to defy his word. And he says, thou shalt have no other God before me. Woe unto you if you think that somehow God's going to defy himself and allow for you to continue to chase a promise while you refuse to see him and to see what he's doing to you in the midst of the process. He's teaching you something. Maturity you need to learn. You go to the job and you always have an attitude. That's immaturity. That's immaturity. You need to grow up. I feel like they're always picking on me. No, the criticism is for you to be better. I feel like nobody like me. Well, it doesn't matter if they like you or not. You are there to fulfill an assignment. You are there to do a job. You are there to work as unto the Lord. It is not their job to babysit your feelings and your emotions. Well, they don't understand my culture. I don't care if they don't understand your culture. You don't go into a place having to figure out if they can handle you. No. That ain't how this works. You come into the culture, you come in to fit the culture. And if the culture is not of God, then you go in and you be a light to help to shift the culture. We don't want to focus on our process. We don't focus on our process. Last thing I'll say, and I'll say this. My son came to me a couple years ago and he had a slingshot. And he was trying to figure out how it worked. And so I was sitting there with him and we put the ball inside. We put the ball in the rubber bands. We had the stick. And I told him, I said, son, in order for you to do it, you got to pull it back. And then you gotta let it go. And so Logan went and he put the ball on the band and he held it back a little bit and he let it go. And the ball, boom, fell right in front of him. And I said, try it again. He did it again, boom, fell right in front of him. Try it again, boom, fell right in front of him. Try it again. And he kept doing that. He got frustrated, threw the thing down. He said, Dad, I'm so frustrated. Son, why are you frustrated? He said, because it's not going that far. And he looked at me and he said something that was so profound. It came out of the mouth of a child, but I want to use this as an example right now. My son said to me, he looked at me, he said, but you know something, Dad? He said, if I throw it, it'll go farther. And I said, well, let's put it to the test. We went outside. He took the ball and he threw it. Let's leave that ball there. I said, let me see a slingshot. We grabbed another ball. I took the ball, I put it on the band, pulled it back. I let it go. The ball went a lot further than the ball it was that he threw. This is what I mean when I say that. A lot of times in the process, it's not unlike God that calls for us to go backwards so we can move forward. See, what we want is we want something quick. God, just throw us to it. Just throw us, and wherever we fall on is what we land on. God, just throw me there. Just take me there. Don't let me work for it. Don't let me cry for it. Don't let me bleed for it. Don't let me sacrifice for it. Just let me get it. But I was teaching my son a valuable lesson in life. And that is sometimes you got to go backwards. And you're going to need some resistance. You're going to need some resistance, something to help pull you backwards. 'Cause I'm telling you something, you can't be great when you're comfortable. You're going to need some resistance to pull that band back. And once you get it back, then when I believe it's in 1 Peter, 2 Peter, is one of those, I think it's 1 Peter and 2 Peter, I don't know. It says humble yourselves, submit yourselves under God's mighty hand. It says, and then in due time, it says, he shall exalt you. He shall exalt you at his appointed time. So at his appointed time, he'll pull you back and you'll start feeling like you're going backwards. Then all of a sudden, boom, he releases you to let you go. But it's a process of being pulled back. It's a process of resistance. It's a process of sacrifice. It's a process. And once you get to the place, you're going to appreciate the process. You'll appreciate the no's you got. You'll appreciate the bankruptcies. You'll appreciate the repossessions. You'll appreciate everything you went through because it was part of your process. It could have been your fault. Yeah, it could have been your misdealing. Yeah, it could have been your accounting. Yeah, it could have been whatever you had to happen. But I'm telling you something, the process was helping to teach you something. Even the consequence that you may be going through right now because of your actions could be all part of your process that God could use to help to change you. Because when he's changing you so that you can help to make a better product. God ain't so much focused on the product. You think God needs a better product? He owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. You think he needs you to create a better product? No, God is not after the better product. God is after a better you, because a better you can create a better product. But in order for you to create a better product, I need you to be creative. And creativity is not born in comfort. Creativity is born in chaos. And there's chaos within a process, because you got to learn, you got to grow, you got to go through something, and you got to go through it. And there's no other way around it. If you want to be great, you got to go through something. Every great man and great woman that we talk about today, they went through chaos. There was a process. It was a process before they got to the promise. Dr. King, in his last address in Tennessee, he said, I may not get there with you. He said, I've already been to the mountaintop. I've already seen it. I've already seen what the promise can look like. I may not get there with you. We all talk about his speech. I have a dream. One day, my four little children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, by the content of their character. He was talking about the promise that is to come. But do you understand that he had to go through a process, a chaotic process that was full of resistance, full of hardship, full of sacrifice? And he ultimately paid the ultimate sacrifice for the process, just so that men like me could be able to experience the promise. A promise that we're still experiencing today. So I'm saying to you, don't focus on the promise. Focus on the process. And focus on the God who's with you in the process. He's teaching you something. He's making a better you, so you can ultimately have a better product. God bless you.